Chef's Life, the Truth. This is a podcast about the organisation and the Brigade. So, how do chefs organise their team, and how do you get your team of chefs and dishwashers and whoever else is needed to get the food prepped, cooked, and all the dishes done? How do you get that all organised? And there's one. Basically, it comes back to a French guy called Escoffier, and he basically came up with a long time ago a method of organising work. So a workflow, and basically a process to get things from, if you think of the preparation, the cooking and the cleanup as a process from A to B or A to Z, if you think of it as a 10-step process, he basically laid that out and defined responsibilities for different people, and he put people into different boxes. And one thing about different boxes, he meant by that is cooking food in different processes. There are different things that need to be done that are just quite hard to do, I'd say all at once, but all by one person all at one time. And it's the timing. I guess if any of you have cooked anything, and if you're young chefs, or even if you're chefs that have been around for a while, you know that's always the part that creates, I guess, the stress, and stresses us out the most, and is also the thing that's most challenging. So it's the battle. So if you think of a chef going into work, they need to know where to start, and it's like a journey. Every shift, every time a chef jumps into a kitchen and starts his day, it's not like he's waiting for things to happen to him. He's in charge, and he has to run this process, and he starts it. He goes through this experience managing so many different parameters, things, pieces of information, and making decisions all day, and the pressure intensifies and intensifies to a crescendo. The crescendo lasts for hours, which is what we call service, when the customers are eating, and then suddenly it dies. And at the end of it, when it dies, you've either had an average experience, an exhilarating experience, or a very shitty, painful one. So the way I'd explain it, Escoffier's kitchen organisation method is he tried to organise the work in a way to minimise the amount of shitty days you would have as a chef. Because let's face it, like what I just said, if you've tried it, you know that the hardest thing is the timing and getting all the food on the table for all the people at the right time to make everybody happy, and that the different types of food are cooked correctly at the right time. Because you don't want your fish undercooked, you don't want your fish overcooked, you want your fish cooked. Alright? And everything's the same with your vegetables, with your salad, with your dessert, with your cup of coffee, with your mashed potatoes, whatever it is. You want it perfect. Because cooked is cooked. Undercooked or overcooked. Cooked is a specific point in time for every single ingredient that you're touching. Even uncooked things have to be prepared correctly, and then it's a temperature thing, or it's a moisture thing. If it's cold, is it too dry? Is it too wet? If it's a cold thing, is it ice cold or just room temperature? Or should it be more than room temperature, warm, but it's not cooked? All of these different things which you're doing to food have to actually happen at the right time. And this is the absolute magic of a good chef, is he's able to get as many of those different ingredients cooked, and I use the word cooked even if it's not cooked, and I say, okay, then delivered to the plate, to the customer at that perfect moment where they are at their optimal point in the cooking process from A to B. So Escoffier designed a way of splitting the work up based on foods and those cooking processes, and then bundling them together to say one chef in the kitchen will just cook the meat, another chef will just cook the fish, another chef will just cook the sauces for all of these, another chef will do that salady thing, another chef will just do the vegetables, another chef will just do potatoes and rice. Might as well give that guy the soup stuff too, because all he has to do is heat it up because he made it during the afternoon. And splitting those jobs up in that way, everybody gets to cook their thing perfectly, and then you bring it all together at the right time, and then you need somebody to orchestrate that, like a conductor of an orchestra, to tell everybody what he wants from them, and then bring it all in to the central point, which is the pass, which is where you put it on a plate in an a la carte restaurant, and hopefully everybody's done their job right. And if they haven't, small adjustments can be made to either save it if it's a little bit under, speed it up. If it's a little bit over, slow it down. If it's already over or going over, you can hold things. There's a window of opportunity where it's still at 90%. It may not be 100, but you can hold it at 90 for a few minutes. And that's where the skill and experience comes in. So anyway, that's high level. So how do you actually do it? Looking into one of my favourite books that actually explains some of this. The book is called Classic Cookery, Modern Way, by Eugene Pauli, second edition. I've got to do another podcast just on books, and the value of books for chefs. And that's a whole separate one, but just jumping into this one just to give you an idea. Think of it as a hierarchical structure, a pyramid, right? So at the top of that pyramid, you're going to have somebody in charge of the whole thing. He's not the person doing the work, he's not really the person doing the cooking either, but somebody's in charge of the whole thing as like a manager, and we call that person either the executive chef, which is normally in a hotel, or a head chef, which is normally in a restaurant. Sometimes the head chef in a restaurant wants to call himself an executive chef, but he's not really much of an executive as far as I'm concerned, because you get a high more management and financial skills that are being done by an executive chef, which is what a hotel needs, and the brigades in a restaurant just don't have that. They just don't need that. So that's the difference as far as that's concerned. So high level executive chef. Let's go for a hotel. Beneath that, you then have people that I'd say are in charge of different shifts. So if we've got a hotel, we're on a 24/7 operation, you need somebody in charge of that kitchen at any point in time, and those chefs are called the sous chefs. There may actually be a team of them because of the size of the place, so you may have at least 3 if you're working a 24/7 roster. But then if there's a team of them and they all need days off and you're working weekends and you're open every day, then you may actually need somebody to manage them as staff, and that will be then the executive sous chef. So you'll have the executive chef at the top. Below that, you can have an executive sous chef, and then you'll have basically your shift leaders, which are your sous chefs. The sous chef, depending on the size of the hotel, will be in charge of an area within that kitchen. And the probably the easiest one to understand is the main dining room, the a la carte restaurant. When you get a menu, you choose what you want, somebody cooks it and they bring that food to you. Then you'll have a separate area which will be your banqueting for your big buffet dinners and maybe sit down dinners for a couple of hundred people, weddings, conferences, things like that. Normally another sous chef in charge of those, and then a whole lot of cooks and chefs under that. We take the sous chef that's in charge of the main dining room, the main hotel dining room, and for a 400 or 500 room hotel, that dining room normally seats about 120 people, and that's normally open the one for breakfast, then it's open for lunch, and it's open for dinner, and it's open morning teas, afternoon teas. That thing more or less never closes, but normally closes up at about 11-12 o'clock at night, and it'll open again at about 6 in the morning. So it's normally just shut down for cleaning at about sort of 5 hours during the night. So sous chefs are in charge. Then under your sous chefs, then you're splitting it up into those areas I was mentioning before. And then we've got a chef, so for the sauces, as I mentioned before. So if we've got the sauce chef, and in French we call that saucier. You've got your chef saucier, and that guy at that level, he could be on his own, but he could also have a team of 2 or 3 people working with him, who are then below him. So if you're in charge of a little team, your saucier team, that is what we call a section, and that section, to be in charge of that, I think the French word is a parties. He's a chef de partie, and chef de partie saucier, the saucier chef de partie, is the chef that's in charge of the team for making sauces. And we're not talking any sweet sauces. It's all the savory sauces or the hot sauces. The cold sauces are made by a different part, but this guy is made for your fish sauces, your beef sauces, your veal sauces, your chicken sauces, all of your spicy sauces, tomato sauces, vegetable sauces, things like that. Your warm sauces, your emulsion sauces, your hollandaise, sauce charon, things like that. These are your egg-based sauces with your melted with your butter, like the hollandaise sauce you're putting across your eggs benedict. Those types of sauces this guy's in charge of. He's also then making the stocks, so he's making the big stocks with the bones. He's roasting bones, making stocks for a day or two to get these things done. Fish bones. He starts from the base and he works his way up. It takes him days to actually make a sauce sometimes, of all the different procedures. So he's got a chef de partie because he's in charge of a party of people, which is his team. And then below them, the next layer is his team are not in charge of anything. They do what they're told, and they're called commis. You can have somebody between the commis and the chef de partie called a demi-chef de partie, which is half. So you go from chef de partie, demi-chef de partie, and then you may have commis. And then you can have, if there's 3 of them, if you've got 5 people making sauces, you've got the top guy, which is chef de partie. You've got demi-chef de partie, which is in charge when he's not there. And then you've got commis. Your commis, you may have 2, and you may have a 1 and a 2. So you'll actually rank them in order, because everyone wants to know their rank in a kitchen. Shit flows downhill, so you want to know where you stand. So you may have commis 1, commis 2. Commis 2 might have just finished his apprenticeship. So you may actually have one below that, which is the apprentice as well, who's just there helping out for the day or a week or 2, learning his part before he moves on somewhere else. So you've got an apprentice, you go up to a commis once you're trained, and you finish your exams. You work as a commis, 2nd, 3rd commis. to Komi 1. Then from there you get promoted to a demi shifter party, which is then you're in charge of that group section, like we're talking about the source section, when the shifter party is not there, because you might take a time off, a day off, or you might go home, maybe starts early and somebody needs to be there till like 6 o'clock in the evening or something, so you have different shifts. And that is your whole source section in a larger hotel. Same structure for different foodstuffs that you're actually cooking, like I mentioned before. Same for vegetables, and for our vegetable chef is called entremetier, and the entremetier is in charge of all of the vegetable preparation and cooking. And we're not excluding salads. Salad is a separate part. Entremetier does all of the vegetable dishes. If there's vegetarian dishes, he does as well, and he also does the soups, and he does the farinaceous as well. And the farinaceous is then your rice, your pastas, your potato dishes. Anything your starch dishes is your farinaceous, and that's your entremetier. It's one of the hardest and most tiring areas to work in. It's tough. You're cooking pastas, big bowls of pastas. You're cooking risottos. You're cooking soups. They're cooked. You're straining them. You're passing them. You're mixing them. You're straining them. You're chopping vegetables for days. You never stop chopping vegetables. You never ever stop. You're chopping onions till the cows come home. But you're bringing them. These are cooks. These are real cooks that know how to get vegetables and these food stuffs done. There's no glory in the entremetier, but he is the, how would you almost say, he is the grunt in the kitchen. Strong entremetier team with a strong leader. Grafters, they are the solid base. If you think of any of your dinners, the turkey is, the American Thanksgiving dinners. The turkey is beautiful, the sauce is beautiful, oh great, but who the hell cares about who made the mashed potato? But if the mashed potato isn't done properly, if it's not hot, if it's not creamy, if it's not salt and peppered, if it's not there and it's airy but not too airy, it's not watery, if your mash is crap, it ruins the rest. There's no glory in it, but your entremetier, and that was one of my favourite parts to work, because this is, you get respect. Good entremetier, you hold that kitchen together. It's the heart of the meal. It's what gives people a full feeling and sustenance. It's cheap ingredients. It's also creating magic with cheap ingredients. And if you can do it, and do it well and consistent, you get respect in the kitchen. Because these are the grunts and the grafters. But there's a lot of logistics in it as well, and a lot of storage. And even if the ingredients aren't the high costs, one per kilo, if you're talking, compare it to meat, the volume is there, and the work, you put a lot of work into it. Piece of meat, chop it up, fry it, salt, pepper, done. Yeah, expensive, not a lot of work. You make a good soup, costs you nothing, and you'll spend hours, half a day making it. Alright. So then we move on. The next one the next key one is garde-manger. So your cold side, all of your salads, all of your starters, all of your cold sauces, all of your little canapes, all your little pretty little stuff, your hors d'oeuvres, all of that sort of stuff, all your sandwiches, anything like that on the cold side, garde-manger. Basically not cooking anything apart from frying a few livers to make a liver pate or things like that. They will roast their own chickens if you don't have I think it's a rôtissier guy just doing the roast stuff. Garde-manger will quite often roast their own beef and roast their own chickens that they need the cold meat for, things like that. They will also then will cook les pâtés en croûte, so you're making the special old pies with the jelly inside and things like that. They will also do terrines and pâtés as well. But that's at the top end, and that's the really high class stuff and the hard work. But it'll also come down to things like sushi. It'll all come down to making sure you've always got good strawberries and fruit bowls. We'll be doing orange juices. It will be doing carrot juices for the morning breakfast. They may be in charge of doing the the cold foods for breakfast. So a lot of fruit platters coming out of the garde-manger. Garde-manger is definitely logistics and planning and purchasing and freshness and looking after fresh foods, making sure your berries are not rotting and contaminating each other, and you're not wasting food. So how are you storing food, rotating food, aerating food, storing in the right containers, trying to avoid cross contamination for things like foods and fishes and smells. So your cheeses, you're looking after, that you're in charge of them, so making sure in your fridge that you're not storing things next to each other. So the store, there's a lot of money in their fridges, a lot of money. So garde-manger is very much a management person, and also needs a lot of hands and people to actually get the work done. So they're managing staff, and only cheap staff as well. It's quite often a lot of extra helpers that could actually work just part-time, just helping making salads and making sandwiches, things like that. But then you're managing these staff because they're cheap, they're not skilled, and they don't care. So you may have to kick their ass to actually make sure they are not showing you up and making cutting corners and doing things like putting slightly bits of lettuce that are a little bit brown on the edges and things into sandwiches and salads, which will just ruin your reputation. That's one of my pet hates. Every single salad leaf I use, I wash and I look on both sides of it, even at home today. This is the standard I work to. Every single lettuce was washed in a little bit of salt, cold water, and every single salad leaf had to be looked at on both sides before it was put into the container which we would actually take from to make salads. That is labor intensive, that costs money, and that's why a 5-star hotel does cost money and holds those standards, because you've got people employed to look on both sides of every single salad leaf. And that's the level of quality that I expect when I go to a decent place. Never ever anything that is a piece of salad that is actually brown or bruised. So it's garde-manger. So yes, you have a roast chef or rôtissier, if you're lucky. You'll be doing all that roasting stuff, but that also then comes into barbecues and buffets and banquets and things like that. Relief chef. This is like your tono. So this is the guy. Say you've got different teams. What if one person's sick and one team's got more work on and things like that? You need to be able to balance that workload. Chuck in another guy who can actually, or chef, girl or guy, who can actually do that work. Pick up the slack and make sure these guys are still delivering. So this is somebody that's worked in all of these areas, maybe as a commie, and he can jump in and do the work wherever and within that kitchen. He's become the all-rounder and respected for the all-rounder, and can shut up and do the work and take orders and ask questions and make sure he delivers, and can cook these different types of foods in different ways. Not everybody has them. Sometimes you've got to pull somebody from some other area, but it's definitely worthwhile having it. Well, what else do we have? There is a junior chef, sous chef. An idea there. You may have your chef de parties, one for each section that's in charge. So go through them again. Your sauce chef, you've got your vegetable chef, your entremetier, you've got your garde-manger, which is all your cold stuff, you've got your roast chef, you've got your relief chef, and you've got these sous chefs that are in charge. So basically your conductors. Once you've been a chef de partie in charge of each section and run each section and done it consistently, normally for at least 6 months to a year for each section, once you've done all of that, you're starting to learn more management skills to look across the whole thing. And how does the whole thing come together? Because if you can't pull all this thing together and manage these people and get it delivered, nobody's going to get their food on time, and it becomes chaos, and it becomes very expensive, and people's heads are going to roll. And that sous chef is there to make sure things come together, and their sous chef's head will roll if it doesn't come together, because the executive chef will pull him aside and say, what the F is going on? So if you want to learn that, you become a junior sous chef, if you think you're up for that challenge. I've done all of these roles over the years. haven't been an executive chef in a 5-star hotel, but I have in a 4. So I've done all of these roles. So, and the pastry chef, never forget this guy. Same thing there. It's more or less run like a separate. It is a party. It's definitely run with chef de parties in there as well. You can have a head pastry chef, which is almost on the level of the executive sous chef. But if you don't have that, then the head pastry chef is normally at the same level as a sous chef. And then they have their chef de parties within that, and the pastry section will also split. And then you'll have your baker. You can then have your lower end pastry chefs making your day-to-day stuff, like finishing stuff off. Then you'll have the one that's producing the pastry products with the recipes, and then once they're cooked and done and set, then you'll have other people preparing them. So then cutting the cakes and glazing the cakes and things like that will be the lower end person, but you'll have the main pastry chefs and the chef de parties actually measuring and working through the recipes, because they've got the feeling and they've got the understanding of doing it. Same thing there, sous chef have to pull all that together. So in a smaller restaurant, you may just have head chef, a sauce chef, vegetable chef, and a garde-manger, and that's it. And garde-manger, what we call the cold stuff. Okay, that's what the term I'm looking for is your cold larder, is your larder chef, and that's the cold stuff as well. So larder is the English word for it, or garde-manger. Quite often in a smaller restaurant, they'll do the desserts as well. So they'll do the patisserie part of it, your pastry side of it. So just go through it again. Smaller restaurant, head chef, who's hands-on actually cooking. Normally they're doing the hot food, so as in the meat and the fish. You'll have a sauce chef, and that sauce chef quite often does the meat and fish as well, and the sauces. You have a vegetable chef, and then you've got your garde-manger, who's done your desserts as well. So you've got like 3 sections there. That's normally the way it's split up. There are differences between Europe and America, the way things are split up. America, they use terms like a line chef. Not actually sure, but I think it's more, you've got a preparation team which does all the preparation, like I was talking about the vegetables and all the rest of it, but they don't do the finishing. So they do the sauces, they do the vegetables, they do the farinaceous dishes, they do the preparations of the meats, and then the final finishing off is what we call the line chef, which is then taking those components, frying the fish, or doing the fish and poultry and meat dishes at the last minute, putting the components together, finishing the sauces off. They may actually do some of the sauces a la minute, which means to order. They'll then be working with those components, taking the base sauces, finishing them off and putting them on the plate, and the sous chef is pulling the whole lot together. So the American system is slightly different, but in theory it's the same principle as that they split the work up into different areas of responsibility. So I think we've covered most of it. Just run through a couple of the other terminologies and things that are actually used. So we mentioned head chef, sous chef, chef steward. So I guess the most important people in the kitchen are the dishwashers, and I don't mean that by a joke. None of this works without getting the dishes done, and that's not just at the end of the day. This is throughout the day. You need pots being re-cleaned, you need dishes being redone from lunch to dinner, you need glassware being cleaned correctly and then dried and stacked away. A lot of the cooking utensils are used 3 to 4, 5 times during the day, so you've got like industry level cooking equipment, dishwashers, and then you've got glassware and crockery dishwashers as well. So your stewards or your dishwashers can also be organised into groups and teams. Somebody will be doing that more kitchen utensil pot dishwashing, and then you have another section that'll actually be doing just the crockery, and you may even have a third one doing glassware. and you may have then people, a steward in charge of that called a chief steward. I'll do another whole section, a short one, just on the dishwasher. There's definitely worth its own talk. Okay, I think that's most of it. Night chef is another one. Somebody working the night, doing room service. You won't get that in a restaurant, but you'll definitely get it in hotels. So they'll be doing the room service menu during the night, but they'll also do preparation for breakfast. So making hash browns, making the pancake batter, whisking up eggs for scrambled eggs, make the hollandaise sauce, get them ready, maybe get some stuff from the bakery, getting all that ready, and setting things up ready for the breakfast staff coming in, and making fruit platters and things like that. You'll have a banquet chef, so I mentioned the big banquets and conferences and weddings, things like that. Your banquet chef, you can have a specific one. He can pull resources from the different groups I mentioned before. If he needs soups, he can order that from the entremetier. If he needs vegetable dishes, he can order it from them as well. If he needs some of the meat dishes, components there, he can order some of that. But the banquet chef quite often is doing most of it themselves, but they can take from the main kitchen, from those other teams, order it and get it delivered and done through them. Normally a bit of give and take. If they may have some extra stuff that they're making, and they can go back to the other team as well. So I think we've covered most of it. A few of the other ones there, I mentioned the baker as well. Quite often, they'll be starting at like 2 in the morning. In a bigger hotel, he's definitely got his processes sussed. He'll actually be yeasting some of his doughs in the freezer, things like that, so he's not doing everything from scratch every day. He's got his processes. It's actually turn it on, don't turn it off. And bigger places, you'll actually have restaurant, your own butchery and your own butcher, and he may actually have assistants working in the butchery as well. And if you're even bigger, you may even have your own artist, an artist team. So you actually be doing sculptures, fruits and vegetables, and even ice, doing centerpieces and things. Quite often, those people can be working extra in the garde-manger, doing those fruit platters and sandwiches and salads and things like that. And then they're also doing 50% of their job. They'll be doing some artwork for the buffets and more intricate stuff where needed. So I think that's covered most of it. This whole system that I've described is what we call the party system. As I mentioned, it's a French design. It's been used for a very, very long time. It comes from the French chef Escoffier. He was the one that designed it. He came up with a bright idea, and it's still being used today. Hope you found that interesting, and giving you some decent information about how things are done as far as the organisation and the brigade of kitchens. So thank you. Cheers.